Hey there, and welcome to another Health Essentials podcast. I'm John Horton, your host. Lawns cover more than 40 million acres in the United States, and many of us fixate on making every blade of grass look perfect. That's fabulous for our yard's appearance. It's often not so great for how our bodies feel. Hours of laboring outside can leave you with sore muscles, achy joints, and painful reminders of what it took to get the job done. But physical discomfort isn't a curse that comes with a green thumb. How we tackle our chores typically contributes to the hurt we feel afterward. All too often, we put unnecessary strain on our bodies just by the way we move. Today, we're going to work on finding relief with the help of chiropractor Andrew Bang, a regular guest on the podcast. Dr. Bang is one of the many experts at Cleveland Clinic who chat with us every week to help us better understand how our bodies work best. So with that, let's see how we can yank out deep-rooted weeds without bringing on deep-rooted pain in our backs, knees, and shoulders. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Bang. It has been way too long since you've been with us.
I know. I keep thinking we need to have a standing appointment so we can hang out more often.
Yeah, we're going to need that. So we'll have to get that on the books.
Good.
So I'm an oddball stats kind of guy, and researching yard work pain turned up some real gems. One survey I found estimated that homeowners may spend up to 48 days of their lives cutting the grass.
Wow.
So that's, kind of explains why we might have some aches and pains.
That's crazy. Wait. You're telling me if I just get like a zero escape lawn with like rocks or that fake AstroTurf, I'm going to get a month and a half back to my life?
You might, but then you lose the joy of putting those nice crisp lines in the lawn that make your neighbor jealous. So
I don't know. That 48 days sounds pretty appealing.
It does. But clearly a lot of us have mowers and we're out there doing laps in the yard.
They love their green grass. Yes, they're bent lawns out here in Ohio. We got some bent lawns, but those are some serious work, my friend.
They are. And that's why, when it comes to yard work, I'm always surprised at how achy I feel after an afternoon of playing around in the dirt and taking care of everything. Nothing seems to hurt while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But then it's a few hours later, I'm like, ow, like, what is happening here? So what is going on?
All right. Let me answer your question with a question. I know the answer, but what do you do for a living?
I'm sitting here on my butt talking to people like you.
That's right. So what's happening for most people, we just live in the society of technology and we're going from one extreme to the other. So you're going from like this sedentary life to now all of a sudden you become this weekend yard warrior and your body just not physically fit for it. A lot of times it's crazy. You're doing a task repetitively for a long time without conditioning. That'd be like if I said, John, I know you only go on a bike ride once a year, but let's go do a 50-miler bike ride. You're going to be so sore and so much pain the next day or later that night.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't do that. And so we kind of are doing the same thing when it comes to yard work.
Well, and you just kind of do it and you'll spend hours out there. And like you said, you're not thinking about it while you're doing it, but then it just, the toll it takes later and you know it.
Yeah, no, it does. You have that. So the mechanism of you're not doing anything with your job and then you're jumping into all this yard work. And the other problem we run into, the second class of people who may have a more active job or lifestyle, is you tend to do the same things in the yard. For instance, like you get started weeding, you want to weed the whole, flower garden, or you start mowing, you got to mow the whole yard or whip the whole yard. And what I found is a way to try to avoid some of these back pains is by becoming a multitasker. Essentially, you're going to take turns and breaks in between your tasks. Yes, it's a little more broken up, but you'll find that you'll have less aches and pains if you kind of vary your start and stop of weeds. So I'm going to weed for 20 minutes and then I'm going to switch and go mow the front yard. Then I'm going to go back to weed for 10 more minutes. Then I'm going to whip for 30. And to be honest, it's just like going to the gym. You wouldn't do the same exercise an hour in a row. It's going to lead to problems. You take breaks.
But we do that. You are right. Because you'll start weeding and you just get in that mode and you do it for, you're on your knees and pulling stuff for an hour and that causes problems.
It totally does.
So what are the most common yard work aches and pains that you hear about from people?
Yeah, so you're going to run into the most common aches and pain is the low back pain. And that's because like this vast majority of the population of the world will experience low back pain sometime in their life. So just statistically, that's what we're looking at. And I mean, this is going to be from, again, we already kind of mentioned the top ones, like you're mowing, weed eating, where you're kind of bent over with the little whipper. You're weeding the garden, like hand weeding, digging. There's a lot of back involved in all of those things. And there's some really simple things that you can do to take pressure off your low back, besides what we've already mentioned by switching jobs and not doing one task until it's complete. That really save your back. Can I talk about a couple of those?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go.
Okay, so I love the gardening. I love the vegetable garden. I hate weeding my vegetables. So strategically, what you need to do is you need to create the right kind of balance in your low back. Okay, gravity's huge. It's always bearing down on top of us, and your spine is shaped like an S for a very specific reason. It's a spring, essentially. And as gravity comes down, it disperses its forces throughout the spine, so not one disc or one vertebra has all the pressure from gravity or your upper body weight.
Okay.
So when you're sitting and weeding, if you're hunched over, it's straightening out your spine and putting all that weight onto one vertebral body, which is going to land you into a lot of problems.
That's exactly how I weed too. I'm going to tell you right now.
You need to get, sometimes a 5-gallon bucket's a little too tall, but a 5-gallon bucket or another type of stool where you can sit and then have better posture, be closer to the weeds where you can reach down and keep your back a little bit more upright. Okay. But like we talked earlier, if you even have the best posture while you're sitting and weeding, if you do that one task for a super long time, you're going to have problems, even with the best posture. So take a break, switch it up, move to a different task after doing that one weeding task for a while. So you move to mowing, okay? That one's pretty good because a lot of those self-propelled mowers will take pressure off your back. So then you move to whipping. You got that little machine. You got to make sure they're long enough for you. Some of them you can purchase if you're really tall like me. You're still hunched over for a long period of time. So buy the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. That's a huge one. And then let's move to shoveling. Let's say you got to plant a tree or a flower, or you're doing mulching. Oh man, everyone's favorite.
Edging the beds, man. I know that, like, it just kills you after a while.
Yeah. You need to use leverage, okay? And leverage is essentially changing the force from high force to a low force. That's what we use leverage. So shovels leverage, us lifting a lot of heavy stuff by using our arms. If you will take your hand and roll and stretch it out to the very tip, as close as you can to the tip of the shovel, that gives you more leverage. But if you're bent over, you're putting all that pressure onto your low back. So you got to squat. I know it seems kind of awkward, and at first it will, but you get used to it. So when you're mulching, you literally shovel while squatting, stand up, then you can throw the mulch into the wheelbarrow or into the bed. In fact, that's where wheelbarrows come in. They save your back immensely because they can take a lot of load and move it to a designated spot without you having to do repetitive cycles of like twisting and throwing the mulch. You want to have more mulch into the wheelbarrow right in front of you, move the wheelbarrow, dump, and then use a rake to move stuff instead of like hooking it, throwing it. You're going to run into a lot of problem from that.
See, I feel like I'm living one of those, I was this years old when I learned something memes right now. So, yeah. I've been doing all of this. Every time you say this is how you should not do it, I'm like, no, that's pretty much exactly how I do it every time I'm out there.
Let me, you bring up a good point, and let me just further emphasize shoveling, because in Ohio, we all mulch a ton, and probably throughout the United States, but Ohio, I know we mulch all the time. The most common way to injure your back is through flexion or bending forward and rotation at the same time. Okay. That's when your discs are most vulnerable. That's why when they talk about lifting, they lift with your legs. You want to bend, keep the box right in front of you, lift straight up. So when you're shoveling, you want to follow similar principles. So place your wheelbarrow like right in front of you, John.
Okay.
You shovel the mulch and then come straight up, and then if you're throwing the mulch into the wheelbarrow, it's forward instead of twisting to the side. That in and of itself will protect you. And one more stat. I know you love numbers, and I wish I had it memorized, but I can give you some estimates, okay? You can look this up and maybe share it in the notes. You can squat and pick something up close to 4,000 times before they will see damage in your low back begin to happen.
Wow.
You can bend over and pick something up, like flex forward, only about 240 or 50 times before they can see damage in your low back happening. So squatting to pick things up, keeping your back straight, is so much safer for your back than the bending and scooping. So you've gotta squat when you're working in the yard.
Well, we're going to save our backs already with these sort of tips. What about, you also hear a lot about knees, hips, shoulders, wrists. I mean, are those all things too that we're just beating up as we're working in the yard?
Yeah, again, if you're a yard weekend warrior, as it were, you're not climatizing your joints to do that kind of work. You're overworking them. Or if you're like, I'm in good shape. Well, again, you wouldn't just go to the gym and do the sled squat, where you're working your knees, hips, and ankles, like pushing weight for an hour at a time. You're going to get injured. Everybody knows that. So take that same sense you'd use in the gym and apply that to your yard work to protect yourself.
So, and look, so you've gone over a bunch of stuff, like not being in a position for a long time, using, proper form, not overdoing it when you're torquing with the wheelbarrows and all that stuff. The one thing I read, and I never do this, and I want to know what your advice is on this, is that you should warm up before you start working in the yard. And to be honest, I've never even thought of doing that. My warm up is walking out to my shed and trying to get my mower to come to life. So what should I be
warm
doing
up? Starting the old mower.
Yeah, until you yank that cord a few times. That's about, that's the extent of my warm up. So what should we be doing to get ready to hit the yard?
Okay, so granted, it's not realistic. Most people are not going to warm up unless you already suffer with back pain or shoulder or wrist pain. You probably will take me a little more seriously, but it is literally just like going to the gym. You would never go right to a deadlift or a military press or a bench press or a squat cold. You would not like put it on max and just go right to it. You would warm up, because everyone just gets that. Like, we just kind of intuitively know, if I warm up, I'm not going to get injured. And literally, you can apply that same principle to yard work. Pick the muscle you're going to be doing, and as you're walking out to your flower bed, it's so easy just to do range of motion. A warm-up doesn't necessarily mean that you're like spending 30 minutes breathing and stretching. Moving through a full range of motion with the joint you're about to use is super critical, because you do a couple of things. So let's just use the wrist so you can see on the camera or visualize with me. If you take your wrist to its full range of motion, okay, you're doing a few things. You're telling your brain and your nerves in your hand, hey, I'm about to use this. You get blood flow through moving to the area. You re-lubricate all the joints that may have not been lubricated with the natural fluid that they have inside, because you start moving it. You also relax muscles that may be too tight. Let's say you've been using your mouse all day and your wrist extensors are just firing like crazy because you've been using them. And your flexors have not been doing much, and you're about to go do a bunch of flexion stuff. By stretching and moving, you're kind of letting the extensors relax, and you're starting to re-engage the flexors. And it's not hard. You're just doing full ranges of motion, and you can apply it to your shoulder, to your elbow, to your knee, to your hip. Get the blood moving, lubrication, you're good to go.
Well, obviously that all sounds great, and all of your advice sounds fabulous. Both of us know a lot of people do not do that, which is why afterwards we all hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
So if we did not, say we listened to this podcast after spending a few hours out in the yard and now we're paying the price, what can we do to lessen that pain a little bit?
Okay. I love stretching. And I find that, like, when you're quick to stretch after an injury, it typically helps. I mean, there's exceptions, right? If your pain is at a 10, you really need to see a provider. You need to use some ice. You need to rest.
You also need to tone it down a little bit in the yard if your pain's at a 10.
If you, like, let's say it unfortunately happens, you literally pull your back out, as it were, and maybe even bulged a disc and have pain down the leg. It can get severe. You may have to go in, because I've seen it happen. I've had patients come to my office. Oh, I was doing yard work and I can't even move now. Okay, that happens. But for the most of us, we're going to just feel really sore. So a good thing is working through that soreness through walking, through stretching, through 360-degree movement, or not 360, but full range of motion for that appropriate joint, right? Every range of motion is different per the joint, but moving it through the full range, not just sitting back on the couch the rest of the night where everything can now, that delayed exercise soreness starts to creep in. Movement helps reduce some of that delayed soreness because you're helping flush out the chemicals that pain chemicals that form, and you're bringing in new blood and new nutrients, taking away the bad stuff.
Dr. Bang, what about using heating pads, cooling pads? When should you bring those out?
Yeah. Okay. So here's my rule of thumb with ice and heat. When you do research, you get varied responses. I know most of us think when I get injured, I use ice the first 72 hours. And that's a good rule of thumb, but it's kind of hard because research is a little bit, gives you both sides of the coin. Like heat and ice are both good. But what I've noticed and what I try to help patients with is to use both. You use ice when you're going to rest, because that can help decrease inflammation and also just numbs your nerves slightly so you don't feel the pain as much. When I use heat, I want to do heat and movement, because heat attributes loosening of muscles and increases blood flow. But I don't want to sit and heat it because then I might get too much blood pooling at the area. So ice and rest, heat and movement.
And what about, pain relievers? And I know, you hate just going to that bottle all the time, but is that something that people can realistically look at?
So I don't prescribe medication because it's not in my license, but I always find that there's a bridge and appropriate time to use everything. This is one reason we have over-the-counters. They allow us to make decisions rationally. And if you really have a question, technology is amazing. I bet most of your doctors have an app where you could message them and ask a legitimate question like, ooh, I really jacked up my back. What should I use? They love that because then they want to be a part of your healthcare. So reach out, message your physician, say, what should I do? Should I take something strong, weak? Let them guide you so you make the correct decision, because you may be taking other medications you don't want to interact with inappropriately. So it's an easy, quick thing to do to get the right answer.
And you had mentioned like sometimes you can really hurt something. So
yeah.
How do you know when something's just an ache and you just got to rest it a little bit or give it a little bit of time, or when you really need to go in and see somebody?
Oh yeah, that's a great question because it's really hard to know, right? So a lot of times if it's not creating any like numbness, tingling, burning, or like muscle weakness, like I can't walk because my symptoms are so bad. If it's not, it seems like where I don't need to go to the ER, then I'll give myself like a 36-hour window, because it could just be a lot of muscle soreness, even a 48-hour window. If I'm like, oh, I'm just so sore, but I can still do my normal activities of daily living. Ice helps, over-the-counter medication helps. I'll give myself time to heal. But if I'm finding like, oh, I can't barely lift my leg, I might even be like I walk off because my gait seems off. For sure, it's a medical emergency if you lose control of your bowel or bladder function, like you wet yourself or can't hold your bowel movements. That's a medical emergency. Those are the severe cases that we don't really see very often, which is good. But if that somehow happened to you, yes, get to the ER. Or again, it's so easy to now message a doctor, do a virtual appointment, or get in quickly to see someone who can help you with those minor aches and pains if they don't go away on their own after 36 to 48 hours.
All right. Well, Dr. Bang, you've given us some great advice today. And to be honest, I don't think you could do more unless you wanted to stop out and help me in the yard this weekend. So, we can talk about your schedule after
sure.
we're done
here. John, I just got a plethora of time.
I know. But just, is there anything else we should know on the medical front before I get you booked to help me?
To help? I'll just bring my kids. That's like why I had so many, so they can do my yard work. I never do yard work. I was kidding. No, I just want to leave people with this, like, keep this in mind. It's really easy. Brace, stools, and tools. Okay. If you know you're going to do a ton of bending, repetitive tasks, like I got to get this done. I use back braces when appropriate. I don't leave them on all the time because they create problems. Long-term use, but short-term use, they're great. Helps you keep your posture and not bend too much, put pressure on your back. Brace, stools. I love using proper stools to keep good ergonomics, and tools. Buy the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. Save yourself lots of time and save yourself from injury.
I'm ready to go hit the yard this weekend. I'm going to shovel right, and I'm going to try to keep those aches and pains at a minimum.
Good. Glad to hear it.
All right, Dr. Bang, thanks a lot for coming in. I always appreciate you making some time for us.
You're welcome. I'll talk to you soon, John.
Bye-bye. Most of us spend hours a week puttering around the yard, and that's often followed by days of feeling the effects in our muscles and joints. But by following Dr. Bang's yard work tips and doing a little self-care, you just might feel as good as your lawn and garden no doubt look. If you liked what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment to share your thoughts. Till next time, be well.